Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. The topic today is legislative priorities for business in Pennsylvania. But first, we're joined by John Cole, reporter from the PA Capitol Star. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me on this morning.
You've been keeping track of Donald Trump's march to victory in Pennsylvania. What's the latest development?
Yes, so again, former President Trump, now we could say President-elect Trump, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania, winning the state's 19 electoral votes. That call was ultimately made by the Associated Press early on Wednesday morning of last week, several hours after the polls closed. As we know, Pennsylvania was sort of viewed as like the biggest prize of the 7 swing states because it had the most electoral votes on the line. And in comparison to 2020, in which Trump lost the state to Democrat Joe Biden, Trump made progress in essentially most of the counties in the state. 4 counties I wrote about in particular, in which he flipped from blue to red, as I would like to say, counties that he lost in the previous presidential election cycle to this time around. 2 of them are viewed as bellwethers, and the 2 of the other counties that he's seemingly flipped are areas that have not been won by a Republican candidate for president in decades. So really fascinating there, and we can get into those specific counties if you'd like, Larry.
Go ahead, John. Tell us about those 4 counties, please.
Absolutely. So the 2 counties that garnered the most attention leading into Election Day were Northampton County, which is situated in the Lehigh Valley. It's often viewed as a very good indicator of how candidates are going to do for statewide office. In 2020, where Democrat Joe Biden won the state, and then Attorney General Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, won the state. They both won Northampton County, while at the same time, Republicans Stacey Garrity and Tim DeFore, who were running for Treasurer and Auditor General, also won the county. So Northampton County in 2020 had the distinction of being the only county in Pennsylvania in which all the statewide candidates won. So 2 Republicans won the county that time, and then 2 Democrats in 2020. This time around, it garnered a lot of attention because it's usually a good indicator who's going to win the state. Trump ended up carrying Northampton County by just around 2 points. As of Wednesday morning, we're seeing that's the latest results there. He's going to flip that county back in the win column. And also worth noting that in 2016, Trump won the county. So it's a truly a swing county, as people refer to it as. In 2012, Obama won it. 2016, Trump. 2020, Biden. And now back to Trump in 2024.
So let's talk, John, let me ask you about Bucks County first. Our time is limited. Yeah. So let's talk about the fact that they hadn't elected a Republican for president since 1988, and the last time anybody checked, Trump was ahead.
That's correct, yeah. So as of Tuesday morning, President-elect Trump has around a little over 1,000 vote lead in Bucks County. And again, that's a significant development. That county is situated in the Philadelphia suburbs. It has always been rather close for presidential elections, where Democrats usually win it by a few points, but it was a significant development that Republicans were making a big concentrated effort to try to flip that densely populated suburb north of Philadelphia. Trump holding a narrow lead there. It would be the first time that a Republican for president, like you mentioned, Larry, has won that county since 1988, which is George H.W. Bush. Again, even if it was a narrow margin, still significant development considering in 2020, Joe Biden won that county by 4 points. Right now, Trump's margin's under 1%, around like 0.5%, but still, it's a game of inches, Larry, so these margins add up.
John, I interrupted you a minute ago when you were trying to tell me about Erie County. Go ahead, please.
Absolutely. So Erie County, again, is another one of those areas that's viewed as a bellwether. That's in the northwest region of the state, bordered, of course, by Lake Erie. So that is another county in which, like Northampton, in 2012, Barack Obama won it. In 2016, Donald Trump won it. In 2020, Joe Biden. In 2024, back to Trump. The margins were rather narrow, where Trump won it by just around 2, the latest numbers showing of this morning around 2%. But again, that's a significant development given that in the previous presidential election, Joe Biden carried it by just around under a point. But again, another county that is often viewed as a bellwether, shifting in his favor. And then the final county would be Monroe County, which is in the Poconos, the Pocono region. That is an area that the last time they voted for a Republican candidate for president was 2004, George W. Bush. So that's the last time. And ironically enough, that's also the last time a Republican candidate for president won the popular vote as well. And seemingly that President-elect Trump has done the same this time around. But yeah, so there are the 4 counties that Trump was able to flip from blue to red. And beyond that, a significant majority of the state even if there are certain counties that he didn't win, like Philadelphia, Allegheny County, Dauphin County, Lackawanna, et cetera, even though Trump lost some of those counties, and many of them he made gains and lessened the margin. And again, all that added up to a victory. As of this morning, it looks like Trump has a 2-point lead over Harris in the state in that victory for 19 electoral votes in the state.
John, given all this data you've shared with us this morning, what did you find especially interesting about last week's election?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that, again, we're still kind of diving into more of that as we speak, Larry, but it seems as though some of these working class areas that I guess Democrats have had really impressive margins in, again, like Northeast PA, like Lackawanna County, which includes Scranton, where Joe Biden's originally from. I mean, that's an area that Joe Biden won by 8 points last time, and when he's not on the ballot, Trump ended up only losing that county by 3. So again, we've seen some of this shift in some pockets of the state where with working class voters that Trump made gains that historically have been voting for Democrats. And now I'm curious as we go forward with future elections, I guess we'll be looking to see, is this just a Trump phenomenon? Is that former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, spoke to those voters, or those voters shifting towards the Republican Party? Something that's going to be interesting for statewide elections in the future here in Pennsylvania.
Last question, John. Any theories as to why Kamala Harris lost the election last week?
I think that's the million-dollar question Democrats have been asking themselves since the results have been finalized. I guess there's questions about strategy, party leadership. I think there's a bevy of questions. I don't have the answer to that, of course, Larry, and I think we have some Democratic pundits on, they'll give you different answers. But I guess the blame game has kind of already ensued, and I think they're trying to figure out what went wrong. But I think it's worth noting, though, Larry, that of the 7 swing states, Trump won all 7. So this wasn't just a Pennsylvania-specific thing. Trump swept in all the swing states, but Pennsylvania, of course, being the one that seemingly got the most attention because the candidates were here very often, as we all know, leading up to Election Day.
All right, thank you very much, John Cole from the PA Capitol Star.
Thanks for having me.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after a short break. Welcome back. Our guests are Greg Moreland, PA State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business, and Warren Hudak, President of Hudak and Company. Welcome to our program, gentlemen.
Thank you, Warren.
Greg, get us started on a plan that's been referred to as a fair share tax plan. And we know that talking about tax issues is often very stimulating to the business community. So what is that in bill form, and what does it propose to do?
Absolutely. This is a bill sponsored by Representative Chris Rabb out of Philadelphia. It would take the current personal income tax rate from 3.07% to about 12%. That's certainly a concern for our business owners because we already feel like we're already taxed enough. Our small business owners have taken out loans against their personal property. They've taken out massive loans to start up this business, right? And now there's a threat out there that the government may be looking to come back down on them a little bit harder and quadruple their tax rate. And so this is something that we're looking at, we're studying, we're trying to better understand the ins and outs of it. Representative Rabb claims that this would bring in around $2.8 billion extra in tax revenue to our Commonwealth, and that's great and all, but I think the money is better spent staying with the business owners rather than coming to the government. I think we all see the bloatedness of government and how much extra spending they put on. I think if we leave those dollars and cents with the businesses and those business owners, they reinvest them into their company, they reinvest into their personnel, their equipment, hire new people.
Walter, what do you think of that proposed increase in the personal income tax? It's going from roughly 3% to 12%. That seems a substantial increase.
Right now, small business owners are being squeezed. Between inflation and labor and wage pressures, it's increasingly getting difficult to operate. We are finding seasoned entrepreneurs exiting their businesses. Some aren't even selling. They're just walking away. They're done. They can't continue on the trajectory they have. This might be the 1-2 punch for many small business owners.
And speaking of small businesses in general here in Pennsylvania, just how big a population is that? Greg, just give us some perspective on how many businesses would be affected by this proposal if it goes through.
Sure. So we haven't delved into the number of businesses that would be subject to this, but fair to say that it's in the millions. right? And so I think we have the vast majority of all of our business here in the Commonwealth are small business, right? They employ less than 500 people, the federal definition. By way of background, NFIB, our businesses have an average employee count of 10. Right. And so when we're talking small business, NFIB represents the smallest of the small. I can't imagine in my own personal finances having to pay 300% increase on any tax, let alone your bottom line. And so that's one of the reasons why this would have a vast impact on a number of businesses all throughout the Commonwealth and in all different sectors.
Now, here's something interesting. Sponsors of this bill say it would alleviate the tax burden on low-income families. That could be a laudable goal, right?
It could be a laudable goal. But I think instead of handing out, we need to build them up, right? We need to figure out why they're at that level, that socioeconomic class, right? And we need to figure out steps for bringing them out of that class, rather than just simply doing wealth distribution and taking from the rich and giving to the poor. We need to learn a little bit more about why those individuals are in that class and in that specific situation. Build them up, give them the foundation, the education, and the resources they need to be successful, and allow them to be successful. It's not about a handout, it's about a hand up.
Now, let's get an update on where this bill is in the legislative process. Has it cleared the Senate, for example? Have they had public hearings? Where is it?
Thankfully, they've only had a public hearing on this. And down in Philadelphia, Representative Rabb had one down in his district.
So it's passed neither chamber as of today?
It has not even gotten consideration in a committee at this point, which we are thankful for. And, they can hold hearings all day to discuss the validity of a topic. That's great. But I think we have real constitutional concerns reforming, around the uniformity clause with this. It's a very complicated topic, and they had some people testify on that issue. But we just don't think it's a good idea. We should be looking to reduce the personal income tax rather than increase it by 300%.
Before we go any farther, Walter, I think some of our viewers are seeing you for the first time here. So introduce yourself, tell them about the business you're in, and what kind of interaction you have with state lawmakers.
Sure. Warren Hudak and Company. We're a regional accounting firm here in central Pennsylvania. I've been a longtime member of NFIB. I currently, for another day, vice chair. I was chairman for many years of NFIB, and I run their tax committee. There's no better small business organization. There's no better business organization that takes up the mantle for small business. Our issues are much different than the big business issues. So, some of our most bitter legislative battles aren't with the other side. I mean, if you're a small business owner, whether you're Republican or Democrat, we're nonpartisan. Our issues are the same. We're struggling the same way, all in the same way. So some of our big business friends, their interests are much different than ours sometimes. And paid family leave, for instance, they're fine with that. But with us, with paid family leave, the difficulty is it takes away our ability to compete because it takes away flexibility. Small business owners, they compete in the marketplace for labor by being able to be flexible. And taking away that flexibility with mandates and things that the government says we have to do makes us less competitive for that labor.
Now, before we went on the air this morning, Greg paid you a compliment and said that you often see a trend long before anybody else sees it.
That's absolutely true. If you want to know what's going on in the economy, ask a small business owner. It hits his desk first. All of those metrics that people follow, when the labor gets tight, we experience it first. When money gets tight, we experience it first. Every dollar that comes off our bottom line, well, let's put it this way. Every mandate we have comes off our bottom line. Where larger organizations have internal capacity, where they can go to this fifth floor to the accounting department. They have lawyers already. We have none of that. Every time there's a piece of paper that we have to follow, we have to take that money off our bottom line and ask somebody to fill it out for us, right? Mm-hmm. What's nice about a small business owner is we're agile, but don't take our agility away by coming down with all these mandates.
So we've talked about the proposed increase to the personal income tax. So the proposal is to take it from 3% to 12%. Here's something else. I think it has to do with taxes, but I think it's something different anyway. And it's called the 20% small business deduction. Greg, do you know what that's about?
Yes.
What's 20% got to do with it? Start at the beginning.
Sure, absolutely. So this is the federal 20% small business tax deduction that was a part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act back in 2017, and it's set to expire here at the end of 2025. And so this is a real concern for our members. 9 out of 10 American small business owners would be hit with a massive tax increase should they not make this permanent. And so we are really working. It has become our number one priority at the federal level to ensure that our congressional delegation understands the impact here. And this provision was put in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act as a direct result of NFIB's participation in the conversation and ensuring that we're getting parity between large corporations and our small businesses. And so if we don't see Congress act on this, and we're very hopeful that they will act in this upcoming congressional session. If we don't see this, then there's going to be massive tax increases on millions of businesses all throughout the country.
You know what, Greg? Let's put it in the perspective of the recent election. Of course, Donald Trump is on his way back to the White House and Congress. So given this new political environment around the corner, what are the chances of making this permanent?
I think the hope is that it will get done by the end of this upcoming session. We have a great prime sponsor of this legislation at the federal level. Congressman Lloyd Smucker out of Lancaster County is the prime sponsor. And so not only are one of our home congressional folks pushing this national concept of tax reform, but I think there's a lot of hope, and I think there's a lot of support for it at the end of the day. It's about making sure that the dollars and cents, all shake out. And we can make these permanent, but I think that should we not, millions and millions of small businesses are going to be on the hook for a massive tax increase, which is only going to ultimately lead to inflation for the consumer, because there are very few avenues for a small business owner to get price alleviation. They usually roll it downhill to the end consumer.
So let's get back to statewide issues then. And we know that the permitting process was made a big deal of by Governor Shapiro when he took office. And what was the problem anyway? I understand some progress has been made on the part of Governor Shapiro. But Walter, would you lead us on this discussion and give us an example of that problem? And then we'll talk about the remedy that appears to be in place.
Well, as far as the permitting process goes, the real difficulty here is idle property. There's a real true expense to buying a facility, buying property, and idling it while you're waiting for permits to go through. There's rental costs, there's upkeep costs, there's management fees, there's security costs, right? So that property isn't producing anything. And we're sitting around waiting for the government to get their act together. They want more and more money, bigger and bigger bureaucracy. What are they doing? Why does it take years to put ideas into productivity? It doesn't make any sense.
I think everyone, is familiar with ordering a product off of Amazon, right? And you order that product, you get an email. Your order's been confirmed. You get another product, you get another email when it ships. You get another email when it arrives at your doorstep with a nice little picture of the box sitting on your doorstep, right?
This we can relate to.
That is not a similar experience that our small business owners are feeling when they're applying for permits through DEP, right? And I think that should be the idealistic model that we're looking at, right? A small business owner puts in for a permit. They say, we've received it. It's under review. They have a certain amount of time frame to review it. And then once it gets to that, it's updated. Well, the business owner has a much better picture of the time that it's going to take. Right now, it is in limbo. It could be months and months and months. Well, that was supposed to be approved within 30 days, but it's 3 months later. They have no idea where it's at in the process. They don't know who to contact. They don't know whether or not it's going to, could they pay more money and expedite this? They're willing to do that just to get it out of the hands of the government. but they shouldn't have to do that. I think the government should really just do their job. Governor Shapiro, this has been something that we have stated that Governor Shapiro has put in a focus on and done well with in reducing those times, and we thank him for those efforts, and many of our business owners are thanking him for those efforts. But it takes more than a money-back guarantee. This isn't a pizza from Domino's, right? There are millions of dollars on the line. They would rather have the permit approved than the $500 back.
And that is what the governor is literally offering here, is a money-back guarantee. How often do you hear that out of the mouth of a politician?
It's a great concept. The practicality of it doesn't necessarily shake out.
What's the record so far? In other words, has someone had to demand their money back? Or better yet, are the permits in fact being approved in an expeditious manner?
I think it's the latter. I think the vast majority of all permits are now being approved within that time period. We have not heard from any of our members stating that they've gotten their money back guarantee back on that. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's all about getting that permit done with transparency and clarity for the business owner, because like Warren said, whenever there's an idle property and idle permits just sitting there, it's costing somebody money.
So Warren, have you witnessed progress on this firsthand?
Yeah, our clients are seeing the progress. And you know what? Equal opportunity, Shapiro's trying his best to keep his word, and I really appreciate that.
And I understand that this may be part of the plan that's in place. I just know it's been talked about before, that there's an application tracking system. And this goes to what you were saying about Amazon before. So does such a tracking system exist now, in addition to this so-called money-back guarantee from the governor to get your permit approved in a speedy manner?
Not at this point. Not at this point. I think they're working their hardest to get to that point. There is critical legislation out there. Senate Bill 350, which is sponsored by Senator Kristen Phillips Hill from York County, that would do such a thing, right? It would put that tracking system to play, and I think that would be a great piece of legislation for the Commonwealth to enact. And quite honestly, I don't know that it takes a legislative approval to go down that route. I think the department could just design and build the system and implement that system without legislative authority to do so. And we hope that that's a part of the conversation that they're having now and a part of the process that they're building out.
Now, in the last 5 minutes, we've mentioned the environmental department on at least one occasion. So are they often or usually the department involved when there is an extraordinarily long wait for a permit application? Does it usually involve them? And if so, why?
There are several places. Professional licensure is another place where we have folks waiting on their professional license, whether it's a reciprocity issue, they're a new graduate, whether it's labor and industry in some capacity. Many of them are DEP, though. It involves moving earth, some sort of ensuring that there are runoff and the wastewater management systems in place. And, we have a lot of Amish folks that are looking to build additional properties on their properties, and they're running into DEP issues and just progressively more and more studies that need to be done to ensure that the property can handle the water retention system or whatever it might be. But DEP is primarily the big boulder in the room.
Then, as per the changes that Governor Shapiro has made so far, let's say the Department of Environmental Protection still takes too long to take care of a permit. Are there any consequences for sitting on a permit application too long?
Very little. It's very, very difficult to get accountability from governmental bureaucrats that are unelected, and so not to belittle them in any way, shape, or form, but their accountability is much different than an elected official's, right? And they don't have if there's 30 days, well then it's coming out of your paycheck, that fine. That's not how it works. And so, I think that they try to do their best. I wish they would come to work here in Harrisburg a little bit more often. Maybe that would get them working a little bit more. I'm not sure how the work from home over the course of the pandemic and into today has affected the timelines, but I think that coming to work and doing their job and putting the nose to the grindstone and just making sure that these permits are getting eyes on them would really solve the problem.
Warren, let's try to consider a real-world example here. In other words, are you aware of any occasion when a delayed permit cost Pennsylvania a nice big business opportunity?
When in the small business space, we don't have people coming into the Commonwealth per se. They're already
here.
They're already here. So as far as someone not coming in a small business space, we're not seeing that. We are seeing lots of business owners who choose not to, out-of-state business owners, not to do business in Pennsylvania. I do have real examples of those where they,
do they cite the delay in permit applications?
The permit applications, complexity in our tax code, nexus issues.
Well, let's talk about complexity in our tax code just for a minute. I have a feeling you can give us some insight on there. Give us an example. Why is our tax code any more complex than a neighboring state?
Well, just local tax reporting. Part of your local taxes go to school districts. Part of it goes to the municipality. It's a very important component of the funding, but it's fragmented. There's no centralization. There's no standards. Every municipality has their own little nuances. It makes reporting, and now we live in a hybrid environment, where more and more companies are working with remote employees. So you could have a firm of 10 people and have 10 different local tax returns to file as the business. That's insane. It's cumbersome and it's complicated. We have practitioners. I'm vice president or immediate past president for the Pennsylvania Society of Enrolled Agents, which is a statewide tax society. And we have practitioners out of state who just refuse to do work in Pennsylvania due to the complications.
Greg, I know you wanted to comment
Larry,
on this.
getting back to your previous question about aware of any business that has not come to the Commonwealth. While not a small business.
Understood.
U.S. Steel. What happened in Allegheny County where the Allegheny County Health Department held up all of their permits for years, and then ultimately they said, we're not going to locate ourselves here. We're going to look elsewhere. It was because of the timing that it took to get the permits approved for them to do the work they needed to do to refurb the buildings. They just moved on. They moved to another state. And I think that's what we're seeing. We see it on a much larger scale.
Did you say they had waited years here in Pennsylvania?
They had waited years.
I had no idea a delay could be that long.
They had waited years to get their permits approved, and they finally said, you know what, we don't think that it's in our benefit. And we lose out on millions, potentially billions of dollars in revenue, jobs, all of the tax base. And it's not just the jobs at that one facility. What about all the small businesses, the dry cleaners, the gas stations, the lunch place where those workers would go?
Well, the ancillary businesses, kind of the satellites to the big business.
Absolutely. And when we lose those big major hubs, that we're the first people to experience when those jobs leave. We're the first people to experience those small businesses get drastically hurt.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to give you a break just for a minute while we look at program notes for here on PCN. On the issues has PA Health Secretary Nancy Bogan on vaccines for COVID-19 and the flu. She'll be here tomorrow at 7 p.m. Then, right after that, a Pittsburgh company tells us about designing and building driverless trucks. Gerardo Intiriano, Senior Vice President of Aurora, will be here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. PIAA Soccer Championships dominate the PCN schedule on Friday. Here's the lineup. The boys AAA at 10 a.m., the girls AAA at 1 p.m., the boys Single A at 4 p.m., and the girls Single A at 7 p.m. Find out more about the teams that are competing when you go to PCNTV.com. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free of charge on the internet. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers and donors like you to help achieve its mission. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. TV.com. Okay, we're talking about business priorities here in Pennsylvania, and let's move on to another subject. We were just talking about the permitting process. Now let's talk about something called worker misclassification that I've come to appreciate better in recent months. So for the uninitiated, first of all, what is meant by misclassification, Greg?
So a lot of small business owners use what is commonly known as independent contractors. These independent contractors they are, by nature, independent of the entity that they are contracting with. They are providing a subservice to that higher entity, and so they are independent contractors. We are very much focused on legislation that would affect their usage here in Pennsylvania. Many of our members would like to continue down the same path. They don't believe that there are any major issues currently right now. With the current process of independent contractors and how they're labeled, other states have gone other ways with ABC tests and different components that you have to hit to be qualified as a independent contractor. Others have done registration with the Department of Labor and Industry, where you're registered as a independent contractor. I think again, getting back to some of the statements that Warren has made previously. Small businesses really need that flexibility, right? When it comes to the utilization of some of these skilled professionals and other segments of the economy that the small business owner might not be skilled in, right? And so they need the flexibility to use some of these independent contractors the way they see fit. Now, where this argument has gotten a bad name is there have been some fly-by-night bad contractors out there that have done some bad, and people have
deliberately misclassified an employee, and then what are the consequences of that? And I'm sure compensation works into this.
Absolutely. Workers' compensation or unemployment compensation. What happens when Bob's Roofing, who's has someone on the roof and they fall off the roof, and now they take the magnet off the side of the car. Now they're no longer Bob's Roofing because they weren't paying workers' compensation tax on that employee because he wasn't an employee, right? And so that's where we can find ourselves in a conundrum of making sure that folks are labeling their independent contractors versus employees correctly. But it's very complicated. It's not as crystal clear as, okay, ABC, all right, well then they're an employee or they're a contractor. There is a gray area, and so I think that's the area that the General Assembly is trying to address.
The employees in question are often in the construction industry. Why? Right? Why is that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different specialty trades within that industry, right? When you're looking at office or clerical work, it's administrative, and it all falls under that. Well, construction has, there's road construction, home construction, commercial, there's welding, there's plumbing, there's all kinds of different technical expertise under that umbrella. And so oftentimes those individuals own their own business, right? But the person who's running the show needs a specialty plumber, welder, whatever it may be. And so they contract and they hire that individual on for that job. But they need to make sure that they're following the correct process to ensure that they're paying all the right fair taxes on those individuals to make sure that they are covered should they become unemployed and or hurt.
Well, here's an interesting statistic I'd like to share with you. It comes from the PA Labor Department. They say that 4,200 workers are misclassified. So how big is the impact then on the taxes collected by the state? Warren, can you tell us?
Well, okay, so when it comes to independent contractors, let's be clear, it isn't that small business owners are violating any rules. We're not hiring independent contractors in lieu of a W-2. It goes back to the businesses wanting to outsource or having to outsource. Remember, small businesses don't have internal capacity for things. So oftentimes where a larger business will hire someone as a W-2 employee to do that, A small business will contract out for that. They can't afford to hire internal counsel, internal accountants, or controllers. They're contracting out for that. We have a very robust system of compliance right now. Anybody who's been through a wage and earnings audit knows that they interview every former employee during the audit period. Every former, no matter why they left. And they ask them, have you seen anybody getting paid under the table? Have you seen anybody getting paid as an independent contractor that should have been an employee? They go through this list. It is a criminal offense. Now, to the contracting thing, a lot of moms and dads in the contracting world, they moonlight. Maybe on the weekends, they want to make some extra money for Christmas. They want to make some extra money for prom. These things are expensive for average families. So you get a guy who does roofs, and he'll do a roof over a weekend. Lloyd, you mentioned Congressman Smucker earlier. Congressman Smucker years ago, it was a problem. How do they have insurance? What insurance company would insure somebody that's only doing this part-time on the weekends in addition to their full-time job? Congressman Smucker got into law an insurance requirement and made the insurance companies write insurance to that demographic. So it's very complicated, but I think we're doing a very good job of compliance right now.
Well, like you said, Greg, earlier, as far as compliance is concerned, you acknowledge that there are some bad actors out there.
Sure.
Now, there are lawyers that say that sometimes misclassifying a worker is simply an innocent mistake.
Absolutely. I think if you look at the complexity of all of the regulations, I believe we have about 165,000 individual regulations on business here in the Commonwealth. So one of the most in the country, right? We are one of the most heavy-handed when it comes to regulations and laws on our small business and just business in general, community. And so think of the small business owner as the owner, the compliance officer, the accountant, the attorney, they're the internal everything. It is simply very hard to keep track of all of the different goings-ons of government. And so when it comes to labeling these folks independent contractors or employees, it's not as crystal clear as it could be, I think. And so that is an issue where it's not always intentional. And we've run into folks who have unintentionally labeled their folks independent contractors. They started an audit back in 2021. This is a specific incident I'm remembering now as we're talking. The 2021, I got a call from an individual. They started an audit, Department of Labor and Industry. In 2024, they came back and said that the guy owed them $135,000 in fines, penalties, and fees, because he had mislabeled 56 individuals as independent contractors when the department is saying that they technically should have been labeled as employees. Now, over the course of a 3-year audit, at what point did the department figure out that this individual should have been hiring them as employees and not independent contractors? And why did the department not come to the business owner immediately and notify them so they didn't continue down the pathway of hiring independent contractors that were technically being misclassified as independent contractors, right? It's almost as though the department let them get to a point where they find it financially reasonable that they're going to get a large sum of money. Now the small business is thinking about going out of business because they have absolutely no way to remedy that. They don't have $135,000. They could have been notified after the second individual and switched their business model, but they're not, right? And it just gives you the complexity of all of it. Government has made things so difficult for folks to even start a small business that it is. Many people just throw their hands up and go, I have a passion, I have a skill, I have a desire, but the government has really made it so difficult for me to go down this path. It's just much easier.
Might not have the energy or resources to do it.
I'd rather work for somebody else and let them take the burden on.
You mentioned the word remedy a minute ago, Greg, so that prompts the question, what kind of legislation is out there that can clear up any errors in misclassifying employees?
Well, I think really just getting definitions as crystal clear as possible, clearing up any any ambiguity that is currently in law right now. And I think that is really, that's what we try to do with any law, is really just clarify.
Right. What stands out at you that language-wise that should be fixed?
Well, I think, what was it? The definition of independent contractor is providing a function that is core to another business's function.
Okay.
And so it's really, these independent contractors, yes, they are going to provide a function that is core to whatever that other entity is doing, because that is their business. And so I think really we need to take a look at the definitions and really pull them in, clarify them, make sure that everybody understands that they are crystal clear. So we all start from a place of knowledge rather than ambiguity.
Right. And these bills are written for a reason by lawyers to make sure that they're clear.
Well, to make it clear, there are different definitions of what constitutes an independent contractor. The IRS, it's facts and circumstances driven. The IRS has a set of criteria. The United States Department of Labor has a set of criteria. The Pennsylvania Department of Labor has a set of criteria, and so does the Department of Revenue. So can you imagine being a business owner knowing nothing about this? So you go online like everybody else does, and the federal definitions and facts and sources come up. You don't know that there's 4 different definitions for independent contractor and that you have to use the most strenuous one. Who would know that unless you're in the business of that? You know, most small businesses fail. Only 1 out of 5 startup businesses actually succeed. Lack of capital is the number 1 reason, right? So every little dollar that comes off the bottom line, we talked about NOLs, right? Being able to take those losses and carry those losses forward if you can't take it this year. Lack of capital, that helps with the capital, the startup penalty, as we call it, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Then the second thing is what lack of professional advice. Why do most small business owners start without an attorney, start without an accountant? They can't afford it. Okay, this speaks right to the independent contractor, the flexibility issue, the complications of the laws. 4 definitions for independent contractor. It's no wonder why people aren't getting it right.
Now, does it still apply that if a new small business gets through the first year, are they generally considered to be over the hump at that point? Or is that, it looks like that line has been moved. Warren, go ahead, tell us.
It's like 5 years.
More like 5 years.
Yeah, that's the hump. And look, we're finding a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs exiting the business space. They're tired. Labor issues, complexity issues, and some of them are actually walking away without selling. They're just so frustrated. And then you have filling the backfill or new unseasoned entrepreneurs. I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen over the next few years in this space.
Let's talk about worker safety, and that's an important concern of everyone. And Greg, can you bring us up to date on any legislation that's out there that can make the workplace a safer place to be?
Yeah, so I think there are numerous pieces of legislation out there that are looking to target the workplace. I think we're really looking at, our small business owners have employees, right? I've said that we have about 10 employees per NFIB businesses on average. Right? Our employees are the best asset that a small business owner has. Right? Without the employees, they don't have a business. It is certainly to their benefit to treat their employees, compensate their employees the best they possibly can. And so they're trying to compete with large companies to provide healthcare plans, to provide appropriate breaks and time off, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, those decisions need to be made by the small business owner and not by the government, right? And what I'm getting at is that there's a proposal out there for statewide paid family and medical leave, right? And this would be House Bill 181. The problem is not that our small businesses cannot offer paid family leave. It's the mandate, the time period that goes along with it, the tax that goes along with it, right? And so they want to help protect their employees by offering them some paid leave, and 73% of our small business owners do, in fact, offer some sort of paid leave program to their employees to help them deal with the issues that every one of us has to deal with our families and our own personal lives, right? But at the end of the day, it should be up to the business owner whether or not they feel as though those programs really how they affect their bottom line and their business model. And I think at the end of the day that really needs to be a decision that is made up by the small business owners and not the government. We would hate to see a small business go out of business simply because they were mandated out of their business, rather than they made poor choices and they couldn't get employees to work, and then they went out of business, right? It should be on their own volition, not the government's.
Gentlemen, let's talk about minimum wage. That seems to flare up sporadically in our legislature. And the Philadelphia Inquirer recently reported that voters support raising the minimum wage. Let's start with the NFIB perspective.
Yeah, so we did a third-party study on this House Bill 1500, which would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
And it's $7.25 now.
Yeah, it is $7.25 currently right now. What we found in that study was that over the course of the 10 years that the Commonwealth would lose out on 104,000 jobs, nearly half of which would be suffered by the small business community, and about $14 billion in economic output, right? And I don't think that is where we want to be going as a Commonwealth and as a nation, right? And getting back to what I just said is that I would much rather a business go out of business because they tried to pay people $7.25 an hour and couldn't get anybody to work there at all and had to close their doors, rather than government say mandated minimum wage at $21 an hour. Now I can't sell any of my products because the pricing is so outrageous, no consumer will buy it. And now the government has essentially mandated me into closing my doors because I can't compete at this point, right? I think we've seen over the pandemic, there are very few, if anybody, making $7.25 an hour. And if you're making $7.25 an hour and you're out there working, and you would like to find a better job, Greg.Moreland at NFIB.com. I would love to help you find a new job because, I just don't simply think that those folks are out there right now. There are folks that are servers that are making $2.83 an hour, but they're making cash tips and they're walking home with cash in their pocket. Hopefully those tips won't be taxed here in the future, and so they can keep those dollars and not have to turn any of that over to the IRS. But at the end of the day, it's on the business owner to set an appropriate wage for their wage and compensation package for their employees for whatever their business model determines, not whatever the government determines.
Well, Greg, let's not consider Pennsylvania in a vacuum. Let's consider it in proximity to states that are right on our border, like, for example, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. They have about $15 an hour right now. Ohio has $10. How much does that matter, what neighboring states are doing? And should that influence what Pennsylvania does? No,
we are not like those states. We have a vast amount of resources that those other states do not have as well. We have natural gas here in the Commonwealth. We are not like New York. Have you been to New York recently and tried to buy anything? Because I was about a month and a half ago.
Go ahead, what happened?
And that coffee that I got here normally in the Commonwealth, this beautiful Commonwealth coffee here, about $4, right? I go to New York, it's $7 easily, right? And so while you may get paid a little bit more in that paycheck, does your dollar stretch further? I think the argument is no.
What we can't have is more wage pressures. Our wages that we're paying now, 40% more than pre-pandemic. Nobody. I'm on the minimum wage board for the Commonwealth, and we look at these numbers every year. If you take out the tipped employees, there are very few people who are trying to raise a family on minimum wage. And arguably, if you're trying to raise a family on minimum wage, there are other things we should be helping you with to get you past that. And when I say fewer, it's fewer than 10,000. We're not talking about a lot. As a matter of fact, the last 3 years that we did this study for the legislature, this population of unemployed was so small that we had no confidence in the statistical analysis because the population wasn't great enough to be statistically relevant. This is good news. We're making progress. People are not trying to raise on a minimum wage. So the only thing that raising the minimum wage officially would be to create wage pressures. Because what else happens here? The machinist making $40 an hour now is making $60 an hour. There's these automatic triggers for people who arguably who are already doing very well, right? So that's where we're going to find the wage pressures. It's going to affect everybody. And to Greg's point, that's why you see the loss of jobs.
Now, as I prepared for this interview, I saw the remark that the labor market is considered to be pretty good since the COVID-19 pandemic. Sometimes people go as far to say everyone who wants a job in Pennsylvania has one. Warren, you better start. You look skeptical.
Well, okay, so labor is a huge problem. We have available bodies. They're just not qualified. If you peer into those labor numbers, we're hiring more foreigners or immigrants than we are people who were here. There's a phenomenon that some young people prefer the responsibility of 2 part-time jobs over the responsibility of 1 full-time job. We're dealing with a dynamic of a workforce that isn't ready for the real world. It's a serious problem.
And I think we've seen over the course of the pandemic, many folks were working in service industry. You go out to the restaurant, right? And that restaurant, the bar would stay open until 2 a.m. I'm not sure bars stay open until that late anymore. The servers, right? Where they had a full complement of servers, right? Now it's skeleton crew, and so it's really concerning where we're headed. And I really hope that we can turn this around, come out of the pandemic.
And Greg, it's not just servers. Nobody wants to be an accountant.
Yeah.
The official position of the education system is that accountants are going to be replaced by AI. Well, that hasn't happened yet, and we're a long ways from that, and we need accountants.
Greg, I'm going to give you the last word. We have about 30 seconds left. How will last week's election results affect the climate generally here for business? How do you feel about it?
Well, we're generally optimistic. I think if you take a look at the Pennsylvania House and the Pennsylvania Senate and the legislation coming out of both of those chambers, there are 2 different philosophical beliefs in the role of government. And so I think we are optimistic about the future of this Commonwealth and the business community and the business climate. We're hopeful that our next congressional delegation will get things done for us.
Our guests have been Greg Moreland, PA State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business, and Warren Hudak, President of Hudak and Company. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Melissa Maluski from the PA News Media Association about preventing the public from listening into transmissions on police scanners.
Melissa Maluski, Media Law Counsel for the Pennsylvania News Media Association. Welcome to our program. Police dispatches are being removed from public airways across the state. Why is this?
Well, the law enforcement agencies, I believe their policies are based in safety concerns. They're the better resource for the reasons for their policy, though.
Why is it important to have these be public on airways?
So I think it's important to remember that this information, these broadcasts have been public and been used by media for decades without incident. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation here. And I think sometimes it's not. As we've seen these more and more law enforcement agencies start to use encrypted radio communications, we've seen reporting about police activity in the community fall because we can't access it in real time if it's not publicly available. And that does a disservice to the community because the public has a right to know what's happening in their community, and 2, to know what the police are doing and to hold them accountable for their actions.
How would somebody like a journalist or a community member be able to get this information if not from a police scanner?
They can't. Unless they happen to be on the street where an incident is happening. Now, some police agencies, and this varies location to location, some have real-time 911 dispatch information. But that's not required by law, and it's not common.
So
there is no other way to get it.
So this is illegal? Like, they are legally allowed to do this, or is this a violation of the First Amendment, you feel?
I think it raises First Amendment issues. There's not a clear right to access this information under current law. So from a First Amendment perspective, I believe there have been challenges in other states, and I think some other states have recognized the importance of maintaining, at a minimum, media access to this information. That has resulted in contractual agreements between law enforcement agencies and media organizations to open up some channels of encrypted communication for media use. Those agreements don't generally extend to the general public. And I think that's where the safety concerns come from. It's not necessarily from media's use of this information, but from its availability to the general public.
Do you happen to know the number of police stations across Pennsylvania that are getting rid of their public airways?
I do not. And I don't know that that's something you can easily track because we have a very fractured system of local governance here in Pennsylvania just because of the way our government is organized. There are literally thousands of individual government agencies, many with their own law enforcement agencies. So that makes it very difficult to track. There's no one place you can go to get that kind of information.
Melissa Maluski, Media Law Counsel for the Pennsylvania News Media Association. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thanks to Ellen Franz for that interview. Before we go, a reminder about On the Issues. PA Health Secretary Nancy Bogan will bring us up to date on vaccines for COVID-19 and the flu tomorrow at 7 p.m. Then right after that, a Pittsburgh company tells us about designing and building driverless trucks. Gerardo Interiano, Senior Vice President of Aurora, will be here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capitol Preview this week. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.